Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to look deeper into why some countries grow and others remain poor. Sustained growth isn't just about having resources, it requires strong institutions. Without these three pillars, an economy cannot function. Three institutions matters the most. First is the rule of law. Law must be clear, fair, and enforced. Second is property rights. People must be allowed to own resources and keep the profits from their ideas and efforts. Third is contractual rights. Contracts must be enforced consistently. Countries lacking these, such as Somalia, South Sudan, and Afghanistan, tend to have extremely low GDP per capita. Why? Because businesses avoid investing, corruption increases costs, innovation slows, and entrepreneurs cannot rely on courts. Strong institutions create trust, and trust is essential for growth. This isn't just theory, it's at the cutting edge of modern economics. In 2024, the Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to Esmoglu, Johnson, and Robinson for their research on this very topic. Their central argument is revolutionary. Prosperity isn't determined by a country's climate, geography, or culture. Instead, it is the quality of societal institutions that decides if a nation is rich or poor. The Nobel winners categorize the institutions into two types. Inclusive institutions protect property rights and allow broad participation in the economy. This creates the incentive to innovate. Extractive institutions do the opposite. They concentrate power and wealth in the hands of a small elite, stripping the majority's incentive to invest. Look at this satellite image of the Korean peninsula at night. The literal darkness in North Korea is a visual representation of how extractive institutions can halt economic development compared to the inclusive, bright growth of South Korea. Once the institutions are in place, the primary driver of growth is labor productivity. This is the value of what is produced per worker or per hour worked. Simply put, if you can produce more output with less labor, you have high productivity. This is what enables higher wages, better living standards, and more goods for everyone. So, how do we make workers more productive? There are three main determinants. First one is human capital. Human capital refers to the skills, education, and expertise workers possesses. The second one is technological changes. The technological change means the combination of invention and innovation. The last one is physical capital. Physical capital is like the machines, equipment, and infrastructure used in production. Together, this determines how effectively an economy transforms inputs to output. We can visualize this through a production function. The production function is a concept from microeconomics that describes how firms transform inputs into output. Just as a firm turns labor, machinery, raw materials into products, an economy as a whole turns human capital, physical capital, and technology into GDP per capita. This aggregate production functions helps us see exactly what ingredients are missing when an economy slows down. The aggregate production function shows how a combination of labor, human capital, physical capital, and technology determines total output or GDP. GDP per capita is usually more useful because it tells us about living standards. To measure the worker productivity in the real world, we look at the dollar value per hour a worker contributes. Note that this specific measure often excludes government workers and farming to focus on the business sector. The formula is simple. Labor productivity equals real GDP divided by total hours worked. This chart shows United States productivity growth over more than 70 years. Output per hour worked is a measure of the worker productivity, as I mentioned. In the United States economy, worker productivity rose more quickly in the 1960s and the middle of 1990s compared with the 1970s and 1980s. However, these growth rate differences are only a few percentage points per year. The average US worker produced over twice as much per hour in 2020 than it did in the 1970s. You can keep the productivity rising through capital deepening. Capital deepening occurs when a society increases the level of capital available per person. This applies to both human and physical capital. When a worker has better equipment or more advanced training, they can produce more output per hour, leading to higher wages and growth. The right graph shows rising levels of education attainment in the United States. We see human capital deepening in the rising education levels of US adults. While high school graduation rates have increased significantly, today less than one-third of US adults have a four-year college degree. This indicates that there is still significant room for further deepening of our skills to drive future growth. Similarly, the value of the equipment like the plant and machinery used by the average US worker has risen for decades. Notice that the growth level of in the 70s and 80s, which were also times of slower than usual worker productivity. It surged again in the late 90s as the digital age provided the workers with more powerful tools. Economists use growth accounting to measure how much each factor contributes to growth. The evidence across many countries shows the technology contributes the most to long-term economic growth, and the human and physical capital are important, but together they explain less than half of growth. These factors reinforce each other, and the skilled workers create better tech and new machine embody the innovation that require workers to learn new skills. Markets encourage investment, but sometimes markets alone are not enough. When markets fail, governments play an important role. Governments can help by subsidizing education and training and providing tax incentives for investment and building transportation and digital infrastructure and supporting the innovation through research grants and establishing special economic zones to encourage trade and business formation. These policies help build an environment where the productivity can grow. Thank you for your time.